dressed up all nice in a suit. So, Leanne, I think I'll let you go ahead and take it and talk about the technology stuff, and
okay.
We'll continue on.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you so much for joining us on our second ISSOC meeting. And I just want to go through a couple of technology tips. I want to remind everyone to please, let's see, one more person in. To please mute your mic when you aren't speaking. It eliminates a lot of feedback and echoing, so it's really important that you mute whenever you're not speaking. I'd also recommend that you keep your phone away from your computer, your mics, and your speakers. That also contributes to a lot of echoing. The meeting is being recorded. You can see the recording notice up in the top left-hand side of the meeting, and it will be available online through YouTube after the meeting. And I'd encourage you, if you have to step away from your screen or somebody else joins the room, you can turn your camera off temporarily. So for you, turning the camera on and off, the quickest way is the Control E. So you use the Control button and the letter E at the same time. The same thing works for your mic, except it's Control D. So Control D is in David and Control E is in Evans. Handles your mic and your camera. Also on your screen, if you do move your cursor down towards the bottom, a white bar will pop up, and you'll also see a button there to mute your mic, turn your mic on and off, your camera on and off. And in the middle, there's a, looks like a phone handle. That will take you off the meeting. And if you do hit that by mistake, it'll come back up and you'll have an option to rejoin the meeting. You'll be out for maybe 15 seconds. On the bottom right-hand side of the screen in that white bar area, you'll see 3 dots. And if you click on those, there are several options. One of them is the layout option. So you have the ability to see everyone on the screen, the Brady Bunch view, as we call it. Or what you'd probably want to keep it when we're looking at presentations, such as Dave has one up on the screen right now, the sidebar or spotlight view works best. So if you want to tinker with that's at your leisure. And then chat is up in the upper right-hand corner. So if you see on your screen, you're going to have like a little person and a little chat box up in the top right-hand corner in white. If you click on those, it will open up a panel on the right, and you'll be able to see the chat. You can click where it says people, and it shows the number of people in the line. The problem with this, it's great to be able to see it. It's a little distracting if you're listening to the presentation and watching chat at the same time. You're welcome to use that function. You can also just wave your hand and we'll stop, and you can add your comment in. Once you're in there, sometimes it's hard to get back to the white bar to mute and unmute you. So just remember you need to click somewhere else on the screen or click the X up in that bar to be able to get out of chat, to be able to use all the other functionality on the screen. If you are looking at all the people on the screen, you'll probably see one that's called Private Caller. That is the phone line that allows the general public to listen into the meeting today. They can't participate. They were allowed to send questions in advance. We didn't receive any questions. But that meeting, that line is very important, and Raymond Marshall is monitoring that. If it goes down for any reason, we will have to pause the meeting until they get that up and running again. So if Raymond pops in and says he has to pause the meeting, that's what's going on. We have several IT staff people on the phone to help us today. So if you see Raymond, Mark, San, Esdras, Chris Prasad, Dave Wilhelm, Deepak, they all may be popping in and out of the meeting. They're there to support in case there are any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. And during the meeting, we will stop periodically and take a break in case there are questions. Virtual meetings are great, and it's wonderful that we're able to do this right now. Somebody can be remote, but it also gets dicey when people would want to ask questions. So we will pause periodically. If you have questions, you can always wave your hand, and Mr. Porter is going to do his best to try to keep an eye on everybody, and we'll stop, and so you can ask your question. If you're joining by phone, I know Mr. Radcliffe was on the phone. I'm not sure if he still is or if he's on camera, but if you're on the phone and need to stop, just unmute and say your name so we can recognize you, and we'll pause. For voting, it is nearly impossible to take roll on every item to verify. So when we do votes, what we're going to do instead is ask if anybody's opposing the item. And if you are, you just need to say your name so we can get that down for the record as to who's opposing an item. For attendance, we're not going to do roll. I can see who's joining the call, and so I have that taken care of. If there's anyone on the public line that would like us to know they were in the meeting, they can send me an email afterwards. My email information was in the public meeting notice where you got the phone number to dial in. So just let me know if you want to be included in the minutes. And I think that covers all the technology, all my hints. This is my 4th or 5th one of these meetings, and I just keep adding to my list of things to go over. Are there any questions on technology-wise before we start the regular portion of the meeting? Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. All right, does anyone have any issues with the minutes that were issued for our last meeting back in April? I'm not hearing anyone, so we will assume that they are accepted. Right, and now we're doing sales tax program update. Leanne says for discussion only, so I guess this is you presenting to us what's up.
Yes, so this is the presentation, and Dave has it up on the screen. He's driving, and he's going to be talking a lot later in the meeting. I'm just going to get us started. So the beginning is really just to give you an update on where we're at. Sales tax receipts through July were $475 million versus a projection of $420 million. We did get sales tax revenue in yesterday. So Dave's going to go through a couple more slides, and I'm going to have him switch over to another document to give you the latest information. So this was through July. We were at 113.2% of projections, and I'll point out that the last time we met, we looked at data as of December of 2019, and it was at 115%. So the revenues that big, we were 115% of projection. That is coming down as we have had several months where the sales tax revenues were a lot less than we projected due to COVID-19 and the shutdown. So as of through July, we collected 35.35% of the total amount we'd expected to receive over the 10-year window. Sales tax.
Leanne, question. So the $420 million was your downgraded projection?
No, that was the original projection.
So we were still over the original projection?
Oh yeah, we're way over. Remember, we had that's the total. That's from the very beginning to date.
Yeah, I understand that. But we thought there was going to be a gigantic plummet kind of from April through July because of COVID and everybody staying home and not spending money.
There is. And I've got a nice little chart I'm going to show you in just a minute that really breaks it down.
Okay.
I'm trying to stick with the original format we always use to keep it consistent, but I've added additional information in to show you how this works, how it all works. So the sales tax expenditures were about $310 million. The expenditures really have kicked off. The facilities team, IT, transportation, they're out spending and putting all this money to work throughout the county. And I know you're starting to see a lot of buildings being changed and updated, and lots of videos, and we have a couple to show you later on in the meeting. Open purchase orders as of June 30th were $114 million. Interest earnings, $8.5 million. And the fees on the line of credit were $216 million. So again, the fees are far less than the interest earnings to date. I expect by the end of the program, we'll have some extra money there, but there is some concern on the line of credit, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. The Finance Committee really digs into the line of credit, but with the economy and the changes happening right now, when we went to the bank that has the line of credit and asked them to increase it, as we expected to do towards the end of FY20, about April or May, because of the economic pressures, they wanted to raise the interest rate. So and it was going to increase significantly. We decided not to do that. Instead, I worked with the facilities team. They had a lot of projects that were budgeted and work was supposed to be awarded in June. It was delayed till July. Well, June to July doesn't seem like very much time, but it crosses fiscal years. So we took the money out of June and put it back in July. And so I didn't have to increase the line of credit. So it saved us quite a bit of money. We will need to do something with the line of credit going into this next year, and it's something I'll work with the Finance Committee on, and I'll certainly let the ISSOC committee know what we're doing there. But I don't anticipate that the interest expense will ever exceed the interest earnings we've got today. Okay, Dave, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is showing the original forecast. So this gets into our projections, and we want to point out that the sales tax program had a reserve of $51.1 million. And with the changes that are going on with today's meeting, we're back to $50.9 million will be available, assuming everything's done. So most of that reserve is still there. Then when you get into this, a lot of the numbers, when you look at the forecast, the biggest one is short by like $36 million. So we're well under the amount that we have in reserve. So I don't anticipate having to cut into project budgets unless something changes significantly. I think we're good. But we'll continue to monitor this and provide updates on a regular basis. Okay, so this is the slide. And Dave, at this point, can you go ahead and open up the other document? And go back to the first page. I think there's 2 pages here. So this is the report, the finance report, and this is attached, and this is a revised one based on what we got yesterday. So on this chart, if you go down into on the left-hand side in the middle where it's June 2020 and August 2020, that's money earned in June that was received in August. So the amount of money we received, we'd expected to receive 10.3, we received 13.9. Now, I don't want you to get excited because the payment for August includes a quarterly payment. So let's go to the next slide real quick because I want to, the next right there. What I've done with this report, this is not something you've seen before. The rows across the screen, what I'm doing is comparing year over year. So the bars in yellow is the current year, and it shows March, April, May, and June of 2020. And then it shows the amounts for, and let's just look at June as an example. June, it shows what we received in June 17, 18, 19, and 20. So you see it was June 17 was 9.4 million and June of 20 was 10.3 million. But if you go over 2 columns, or one column, I show what the regular monthly distribution is and what the quarterly distribution is. That quarterly distribution is payments that are made by very small companies that only make payments once a quarter. They're not required to do monthly payments. So when you look at just the monthly distribution for June, it was 9.9 million and the quarterly distribution was 3.9. It adds up to that 13.9. That's well above our forecast. But the forecast numbers, you really want to compare the 10.3 million, which is the first number on the left-hand side of the yellow column. And then the one next to it is the 9.9. That's what we received. So we were about 3% under our projection. Now, please understand, if you go up and look at the other yellow rows, so the first yellow row is March. So if you look at the variance from projection, we were off by 13.4 million in March, 13.4% in March. We were off by 41.3% in April. And then for May, it came back to 20.88%, and June is only off by 3%. So when I look at that, it's like, wow, that's a V-shaped recovery in Palm Beach County. Now, I don't know that that's going to continue. I was really surprised at the numbers for June. I thought we would be off by at least 20%. So I'm not sure. I guess we have a lot of people that are out spending a lot of money. So it's great for our program. It was something we'll continue to watch. And the little graph below is comparing again year over year. And when there's a green bar, that's just showing that you had a quarterly payment. So if you focus just on the blue bars, you can see the first ones are for March and you can see a drop off. For April, there's a huge drop off. That's the 40%. We were off by 40% from projections. May came back to only 20% and June is only off by 3%. So I never expected us to be in that good a shape for June. I've already sent a note over to accounting because we have to accrue the entries. And so the accrual is off by 1.7 million. So that's great news. I'm cautiously optimistic with that. If we ever have to go back and shut things down again, certainly that would impact it. But This really speaks to the resiliency in Palm Beach County for sales tax. People are out there spending. So that's really good news. And I'm sorry to switch you back and forth between presentations, but we just got that information. The money came in yesterday. So I wanted to give you the latest information that we had. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions?
Leanne, I'll have questions when you get to that kind of gray and black and white chart you call the sales tax financial summary.
Okay.
Is that part of this presentation?
No, but we can go right back to it, Dave. If you
No, you don't need to go out of order. I just didn't know.
I didn't have it in. It's not in the presentation itself, so it's great to bring it up right now. Is this the thing you're looking for?
Yeah, the question I had is what line calendar 2020, where we're saying the forecast is 128, and then we're saying the actual receipts is 66, and the variance is only off $1,000,001. Obviously, I guess, to me, that's confusing looking at it the way it is, because there's no way you take 66 minus 128 to come up with $1,000,001.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. There's an error. I think that I'm comparing just revenues received, but I'll double check that and make sure we get that corrected, and I'll send another revised version out to you.
Okay, because this is revised, I think, from the one that was uploaded on Board Docs.
It is. It's revised to include the data from June.
Right,
but I didn't catch that error. I can tell you what it's looking at. It's looking at, for the quarter from March, the March 2020 quarter, the variance for that quarter was 2.4 million positive. Mm-hmm. And for June 2020, it's looking at the negative 3.6, which is the net amount we're off for the quarter ending June. Those two numbers add together to being off by 1.1 million. And then it's also the number to the left of that, I'm not sure if it's 86 or 66, that's picking up the money we've received so far this year. The forecasted number is what we're expected to get throughout the entire calendar year of 2020. So it's not looking at just the first two quarters, it's looking at the total projection. Now, down at the bottom of that same section, I have a lifetime number. We're expecting to get 1.3 million. We've received 489 million to date. But the lifetime number right below is comparing, that's an apples to apples comparison. So for the time period through June, we'd expected to receive 430. We've received 489. I can add another row here that is fiscal year to date or calendar year to date. I think that might be helpful. I don't know that I can change that chart because for calendar year 2020, I need to show the full projection, but I can add something that gives you calendar year to date, much like the lifetime row is looking at over life to date from the beginning, from implementation until current. I can do one that's current year to date. So it gives you an apples to apples comparison.
Or it can just be an asterisk footnote at the bottom saying, Don't try to subtract 66 from 128 to come up with the variance, not until the end of the year. Right. Or I can take the annual variance away. I'll work on another way to make that more clear. Okay.
Do you have any other questions on this?
I don't. Anyone else? Nope. Continue.
Okay. Okay, so back to the presentation. We can go to the next slide. This is a summary of the entire program, and it's breaking down the original budget, the current project budget, which is what's been funded to date. Current project to date is based on your last, based on what we're presenting today, what the budget will be. And then the change since the last meeting is the proposed changes that we're requesting today. Cumulative change is the change from the very beginning, and then we add in what's been funded to date, the expenditures through, and I'm sorry, these numbers are as of July 31. I just realized that date right there is wrong. Top of the page is correct, July 31, but where it says expenditures through December 30, that should be July 31st. Purchase orders are through July 31st. Committed to date are those two numbers added together. The referendum committed to date, again, we're showing you how much has been spent. And then this last column was something that Mr. Porter asked us to add a while ago, that committed to date based on the funds that are available. So of the funds that are available of the sales tax, 53% is encumbered. And when you include the projects funded with other sources, it goes down to 48.94. So a lot of times we have projects that are budgeted and we're not going to issue a contract until November or December, but that money is still funded. So those numbers always get higher and higher as we go throughout the year. We're at the beginning of the year at this point. Any questions on that page? And this is really a summary of everything you're going to be looking at today. It's like the big picture of all of it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into proposed plan modifications. I'm going to take the first slide, and then I'm going to hand the whole presentation over, and Dave's going to take over talking for a while. So the first few are not facilities related, which is why I'm talking about them. We did have a change for PPM number 62 is related to the phone system. That project's running ahead of schedule, and the IT department asked if we could take the money that was planned to be budgeted in 22, add it to 21 so they can finish the project up a little earlier. That's really important that we have all the phone systems, especially when people are working remotely. They want to get that going as quickly as they can. So we just moved it up a little bit. PPM number 63 is the sales tax interest. We just added it based on the interest earnings in 2020. And we did really well with interest earnings in 2020. We will not see that in 2021. The interest rates have dropped substantially. So all the money that's set aside for interest earnings, that's set aside and will not be touched until the end of the program or if we get a surprise. But it's only used to pay the debt service on the line of credit. So that money is sitting there. That's where we have a total of about $8 million. If we end up having to do something different and issue a sales tax revenue bond or something else to facilitate the work, some more of that money may be needed. But we want to make sure that's set aside to deal with the borrowing as needed throughout the program. And the last item, the sales tax reserves, there you'll see the other PPMs throughout the meeting. You'll see money coming in and out of sales tax reserves. And at the very end, we have a net increase to the sales tax reserves because of changes that are happening. And I didn't want that extra money sitting in FY21. I moved it out to 2027 because I'm worried that we may have a shortfall at the end. So I wanted to make sure we have money at the very end of the program. So I've just shifted that out so that it's set aside and is not being used. We still have a reserve that's there for emergencies, and we can handle anything that comes up, but I didn't want extra money sitting there. So that's really just an accounting entry. Are there any questions with those?
No questions, but I think as we move through all of these, after I think each one is presented, let's ask if there's any objections to it so that it's fresh in our minds instead of waiting until the end of all of these.
Yeah, I was thinking we could do it by page. They're grouped together by
fine.
page. Okay,
Yeah,
so at the end of each page, we'll check in to see if there are questions.
That's fine.
Okay.
That'd be good.
Okay, Dave, you can take it from here.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the part where I get to talk for way too long, so I'll try to learn to shorten it up here. But PPM number 64, you may recall we talk about that we'll use the phrase facility renewal. As you may recall, that means a project at a given school where we've got a lot of scope items. We're doing roof and air conditioning and fire alarm and interior finishes and playgrounds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we refer to a facility renewal, that's the type of project where we hire one contractor and he does a lot of different scopes. So in this particular slide, this is because we're at the capital budget, preparing the new capital budget for adoption. We have identified a lot of scopes in a great number of schools. Here's the list of the schools where we want to pull forward from out years or from later years to current year, things that we have to get done. You know, instead of pulling the entire project forward, we're only pulling forward money for a roof or money for playground repairs or flooring or something like that. So we are specifically focusing on that urgent work we need. Any questions on that? Because the whole, if you're interested in the details, the actual PPM itself has, I think, a 3-page chart in there that identifies the individual scopes for the schools that are being pulled forward. Okay, if it's okay, I'll move forward. Okay, on this page, the next two slides, next two PPMs, 65 and 66 for Pahokee and Starlight, they are both budget increases in the facility renewal project. In Pahokee, we realized we needed additional money for HVAC replacement and some exterior security lighting, and we just didn't have enough money in that. And Starlight Cove, we also have an increase for EMS controls. We've identified on the PPM and on this slide those items that I had previously spoken to you the last time about our cool, safe, dry, bright, deferred work. These are items that will be deferred until a time when there will be additional money. Any questions?
Dave, yes, I have a question. I suppose we have money to push things up tighter or closer in the budget from out years, but we don't have the money to finish off an entire school that's already in the planning?
Well, the way these work, as you know, that the facility renewal had a certain amount of money for all the scope. For any number of reasons, there were items that are more expensive, items that are a little bit more, more involved, that add to additional costs. Our money, rather than focus on, okay, let's take the first grouping of schools and spend additional money and fix everything that was on the list, the fear is that those out years, there might not be enough money to do that work. So we are focusing on getting the important critical services done. That was where the Cool, Safe, Dry, Bright is focused on. So some of these items that are listed as deferred are items that we're not completely letting them go or not doing them. We're just holding them off as a running list so that if later on in the program there does remain additional money that we can focus back on these, we will.
So these items are then over whatever was originally budgeted for that school. Is that correct? So we're doing
these items were on the original list of scope that should be done at this school, but the funding isn't available at this time to be able to do them all, get everything done. That's why we were focusing purely on the Cool, Safe, Dry, Bright, which, again, reminding everybody, it just means those are the things that when you look at a school building, is it cool? Is the air conditioning working? Is it safe? Is there security measures in? Dry, the windows, roof, is it all sealed? And bright, we realize classroom lighting is a critical component of how well the students do, how their educational process works. So that Cool, Safe, Dry, Bright that I keep working from is what we deem to be the highest priorities of all the lists for each of the schools.
That I understand. I guess like for the first one here, $800,000. Does that mean that we budgeted $4 million for that school, and all of a sudden the numbers to do everything came in at $4.8 million? So we got to kick $800,000 out of there for now because we don't have the extra funds.
It actually means it's even more than 4.8. Let's say if that were the numbers you were using.
Okay.
It's saying in order to do all the really important critical things, Cool, Safe, Dry, Bright, we would need 4.8. Therefore, we're asking for an additional $800,000 to cover HVAC, which is critical, and security lighting. We probably needed more money to cover the paving, roofing, interior finishes, electrical, et cetera. But those were deemed not as high priority, high critical need.
Conceptually, I'm just trying to understand that when we're kicking something down the road a little bit, it's simply because we knew what we had to budget for school XYZ. But then when the GMP came in to do all of those improvements, the GMP came in higher than we had budgeted. And therefore, we don't have the extra money currently to be able to put it back into that school because it's over budget. So you're choosing specific items, the Cool, Safe, Dry, and Bright. So all of these that we're going to see that have deferrals are because certain things pushed it over the budget we had already accounted for.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I wanted to get. Good.
There's a couple of hands raised. I see Mrs. Brill has a question.
Yes, I do. So are we encountering problems due to lack of availability for some of the supplies that we need or increased costs because of COVID? Because I do know that materials and certain things are now there are shortages because things are not coming in from outside the country. Are we being impacted by that?
We have heard anecdotal evidence from some of the contractors that we're working on that certain trades, certain types of materials are becoming more of a challenge, but they haven't impacted us to date. But again, I stress that this is only a couple of months into the impact. So we really, there's oftentimes economically a pretty long lag from when it starts to when we actually see price increases, or in this case, as you're asking, availability challenges.
I can add to that a little bit. I was on a selection committee yesterday for 3 large contractors to do Grove Park. And it was interesting. Their comments were that they now know how to plan for COVID and material shortages. What they're finding is they used to be able to get air conditioning systems in 6 to 8 weeks, and now it might be 17 weeks, but they can still get them. So they're just having to put that effort into their planning process to make sure that they, as soon as they get a signed contract, they make sure they get those long lead time items ordered. The other thing they commented about, which I was surprised at, is that they're starting to see a trend in prices coming down from subcontractors. I don't want anybody to get excited over that, because maybe that won't continue happening and we're going to be whacking Dave to say, wait a minute, over budget. No, we want to see under budget. But I was surprised to hear that, because, it's still a contractor market out there. Still a lot of work happening.
Yes.
Dave, this is Leanne. I just wanted to add for the group, one of the biggest reasons we're having issues right now is the construction costs were increasing and have been increasing for over the last year. We've seen prices just continue to increase and escalate. So COVID is certainly playing into this, and we're actually hoping, and maybe this is not a good thing to hope, but with the recession, a lot of projects outside government may be delayed and postponed, which may cool off the market a little bit, and maybe some of the prices will come back down. So it's something that we're monitoring very closely, but there's a lot of construction going on, and it's just supply and demand to see who's going to get which job, and prices are just going up. That's really the biggest component that's causing this.
Good. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Nobody's chiming in. Please continue.
And and for everybody's benefit, I can't see the rest of you right now because I'm driving the presentation, so I apologize if I miss a chat or anything like that. Please speak up. The next slide is these 4 are returning funds to the sales tax reserves. 3 of them are basically nearing the end: Bear Lakes, Watson B. Duncan, and Wellington Landings. And within a very short order, we expect that we will completely close them out. And we're focusing on presenting both you and one of my other oversight committees, Cork, information on how these things have closed out, what work has been done. But each of these 3 projects had enough money coming back when we said we didn't want to wait until that whole last bit happened. We figured we're going to push all this money back. We knew it was basically done. And the 4th one, Jupiter Elementary, we just awarded that contract. And when we had awarded it, that in fact was under budget, and by a considerable amount, $600,000, and was worthy of putting that money back in the sales tax reserves as well.
Dave, I want to chime in for everybody's sake too, to say when we talk about budget, the way the original facility renewal budgets were set was basically called a desktop bid. And it was the district staff, the construction staff, going out to a sample elementary school, a sample middle school, and a sample high school, and determining what elements needed to be fixed and updated and repaired. And then they came back and put what I'll call guesstimate numbers based on empirical data they may have had for what a roof cost. And that's how the budget for every one of our schools got based. It wasn't a school by school, detailed investigation. So, I think it's still amazing that we're even close to that type of budget now that we're actually getting GMPs that are based on architects' drawings and contractors bidding the work out to multiple subcontractors. and we're coming in, plus or minus a few $100,000. So I don't think anybody should be getting real upset when we say, well, this is over budget. Okay, well, you have to understand how the budget was set.
Yes. And please understand, as Mr. Porter's referring to, while an assessment may have been done when the referendum was passed, there's an actual the hard and fast assessment that you would expect of a school is being done now. When the school comes up for work to be done, the architect is going out with our staff, maintenance staff, and doing a full, thorough assessment of everything to make sure we've got a clear picture of what needs to be fixed. It's not just we're fixing up to $200,000 worth of this because that's all we have. We're looking at the entire scope, what really needs to be done in every one of these schools.
If I may chime in too, it's important to realize too that as we're working on these items and the original scope items, other things are breaking. And so one of the things that we look for is that if it's a catastrophic failure or potential catastrophic failure, we'll come back to you and say, we can't just skip over this. We need to deal with this particular issue. It's a moving target. Our sales tax referendum was passed in 2016. The items were probably looked at the end of 2015. And so, we're several years removed from the original assessment. So I just need to make sure that we all keep that in mind as we go forward.
Well, and I'll add to that, Wanda, in terms of roofs, what we found is that the initial assessment was, okay, we need to repair a roof. And then once the architect, the engineers, and the contractor gets involved, they go out and they find out, no, there's no way we're patching this roof. This needs a new roof. And all of a sudden, that's a major budget hit.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Porter can attest to the 25% rule on repairing roofs becoming a requirement to replace the roof. And that becomes a much bigger project. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go on. Okay. The next slide: returning of funds to capital contingency. This isn't going back to sales tax. I'll go through each of them individually. Old Gove is a property that we were planning on, I guess, basically cleaning up, demolishing. But as it was better served. We were able to convey it to the city of Belgrade as they had a functional use for it. So the money that we would set aside to clean up the site, we're going to put it back in our capital contingency. Old Plamosa, you may recall that's had a life of its own. We had anticipated putting South Intensive there, renovated in the space and putting them there. Right now, we've had an easier solution to get South Intensive into a good space, and this current building, the future of this building is still we're working on that. So for the time being, we're going to put the money back into the capital contingency on that site as well. For the this is one of the really nice things that we do is the Village Academy kitchen expansion. We basically realized the original scope was build them a whole addition onto the end of the building for a kitchen expansion. And when we got into looking into the details, the architects and our staff were able to come to a plan to basically just renovate the interior and relay out the existing facility. And that saved us quite a bit of money, $400,000 that can go back in. And then the last one, Leanne, I don't know if you want to touch on that one, but site acquisition.
I can comment on that. And I also want to kind of wrap up the capital contingency discussion. We had set aside $500,000 a year to lease space for 2 small schools. The cost of bringing them to upgrade those schools to where they needed to be was very large in comparison to the size of the schools and the number of students served, and it made more sense, instead of fixing those buildings, we were going to put them in storefronts and lease space. We were going to lease space for them. We've had a lot of staffing changes. A lot of people reviewed it, and the district found ways to address those 2 schools. One was Sable Palm at High Ridge, and the other is South Intensive. We found a cost-effective way to bring those schools up to the level where we want them to be at. I think South Intensive is in an interim place. They're in a much better position than they are right now. And we have some other things we want to do for them, but we don't need to lease space for these schools. So it was $500,000 a year, a total of $5 million that has been pulled back. All these items, it says return to capital contingency. None of these schools are funded with sales tax. They were funded with other sources. These were all just local capital outlay millage. And so since we don't need those, they went back to capital contingency and we used them to help balance the budget. So this money is actually used to cover the debt service for all the construction projects that are on the referendum list. So it's still being used in a way that helps get our work done that we committed to do, but it doesn't go back to sales tax reserve because it's not sales tax money. So in each of the demos, those projects have been canceled now and are not needed. The kitchen expansion has been revised, reevaluated, and then the site acquisition projects are not done, isn't needed. One of the things that we do every year when we do the capital plan is look at everything. We look at every single project and do we need to adjust it, increase it, decrease it? Do we need to cancel it? What do we need to do or close out? Sometimes things just need to be closed. So that's what we do this time of year is go through all these projects. So these four, we wanted to bring it to your attention. They were on the referendum list. They were on the second page of that referendum list. The first page is everything funded with sales tax. These are funded from other sources, but they're on that list. So we wanted to bring them back to you. Were there any questions on that before we move on?
My apologies. Good point.
Any objections to any of these? Okay, continue.
Okay, the next slide is timing of projects. These are all whole projects, facility renewals and construction projects, modernizations that were, I think they're on the second page, and we're simply moving them either forward or back. You'll notice that Riviera Beach Prep, we're moving back a year from FY21 to 22. The same goes for Inlet Grove. The same for our North Transportation modernization. And our modernization of Pine Grove is moving back 1 year from FY22 to 23. We are, in fact, moving the Roosevelt Full Service Center project forward from FY22 to the current FY21.
Dave, if I can, I just want to add that in most of these projects, the planning and design money, the schools that are moving from 21 to 22, the planning and design money is still available. So they're still working on the design of the projects. They've just realized that they would not be awarding the major construction until we get into 22. They need some more time to get the design finished. So the entire project most of the project's been moved out, but there's still work happening currently on these projects. I see Mrs. Brill has a question.
Thank you. And so I had a conversation with Mr. Burke earlier about Inlet Grove, and he updated me on what's going on. But since I see Mrs. Paul on this call, I just want to let you know that I did receive a call, and I was told that their air conditioning unit is not working again. So I'm just going to put that out there now, since I've got all of you as a captive audience. But please follow up on that.
Yes, ma'am. And we have people out there working on that unit, and we are nursing that school along until we can get to the inevitable of them having a new school. So we are working on that. And so if you see how we have Riviera Beach Prep, Inlet Grove, and then North Transportation, all those projects are linked together. And that's why it's a pretty big undertaking. And in our one-on-one, Ms. Brill, I'll be happy to kind of give you the concept of what we're trying to do there.
Thank you.
Leanne or Dave, question I've got. Whenever you move stuff forward or back, I imagine you've already balanced out the money to know that you're not moving it before you've got the funds available to actually do it.
This is Leanne. That is one of the reasons why that line of credit is so critical. But we are moving things back and forth between sales tax reserves. So I'm looking at the net change for the year and then increasing or decreasing the amount we need on the line of credit to keep things going. Dave and I have had a discussion. He can move things forward to a certain point. I can't borrow for years 8, 9, and 10 of the sales tax. No one will let us do that because they don't know how much money we'll be receiving. But when we're moving things up from 22 to 21, that's certainly doable. So we do our best on the finance side to provide whatever facilities needs to keep the work going as quickly as possible. Every once in a while, I tell them, no, we just can't do it. But 99% of the time, we find a way to accomplish what they're trying to do.
I raised that because the selection committee I was on yesterday, one of the contractors was real proud of himself, saying he could get the school done a year earlier. And I said, well, to do that, you may have to become our bank as well, because I don't know if the funds will be available a year earlier.
Well, Grove Park, in that case, we are borrowing the money for that this year. So that's going to be up to facilities to figure out how they want to handle it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions on that? Okay.
Seeing none, continue.
Okay, next slide. This is kind of a catch-all. This has a lot to do with Leanne and the COPS borrowing. This is each year when we do our capital budget, and I'll do a quick overview, but Leanne probably will speak to this a little better. On a lot of these projects where it's increasing or decreasing the COPS borrowing, a lot of this is based on this is our capital budgeting period. You'll see another presentation shortly on the capital budget. We're capital planning right now and identifying how much borrowing we're going to need for that next year, and also identifying the cost per student station formula increases. Again, forgive me, I'll get into the weeds, but each year the state issues their cost per student station formula, which identifies how much money per student, basically, we can spend on a building. Knock on wood, each year it increases, as does inflation, et cetera. But this adjustment each year is basically allowing us that additional money to spend on construction, and therefore we need to borrow for it. So I'll start with the first one, Plumosa 6-8 expansion project. It's actually underway right now. Increasing the COPS borrowing for the budget, which we're basically at the finish line. We're about to go under full contract, and the cost per student station adjustments. Addison Meisner, K8, which also just started construction, we were able to decrease the COPS borrowing because we ended up able to stay under the amount needed. So we weren't going to borrow as much as we had originally asked for. Grove Park and Malaluca are both in the same vein. They're both, as Mr. Porter mentioned, Grove Park got selected yesterday, the contractor, and Malaluca is next up in a couple of months. Both of those projects, we increased them because of the need for a holding school. You may recall we talked about Verdi and Addison Meisner using a holding school while their modernization gets built. Well, we're going to need to do the same thing for Grove Park and Malaluca, and that's an additional cost. And as well, adjusting for the cost per student station formula. PPM 83, Verdi, we were able to decrease the COPS because this project is coming down to the end, and we realized we were able to return some of the money or not borrow as much to pay for that. I'm sure I messed that up, Leanne, so you can correct me on that language, but and then on PPM 84, the new 05C facility. That is the facility that we're working with the city of Boca Raton, that they are conveying to us a piece of property so that we can build an elementary school very near Don Estridge. It's where the old holding school, or where the current holding school resides. And as we're moving forward on that project, we've got a design team underway, and we've been working with the city to finalize the details for that conveyance. We did need to make adjustments both to the site location, that's part of what the amount of property we're gaining, and the cost per student station formula. So that's a lot of stuff. So I'm definitely going to stop here and open for questions. Anybody has anything?
I'll start. For Grove Park, the contractors yesterday were all saying that they didn't see a problem with hitting our $16.5 million budget with whatever plans Iskovich comes up with. Is the $6.5 million you're increasing it here for the holding school that's not part of the $16.5 million?
I believe it is part of the 16.5.
Yes.
So this bumps it up to the 16.5?
Yes.
I see. So we were under that originally.
Right. We could have built a school for the
Okay. 12 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. And I'll continue to finish off my questions for the PPM 84. The site location is driving higher costs than we thought.
Well, the site location, there are challenges, and we've been fortunate to work with the city. They've been very gracious in discussions and working through the details. In fairness to the city, they're trying to make sure they give us no more land than we need to give us a good school. So we had been working, our design team had been working with the city staff to try to fine tune a rough estimation of where we could place the building. There are a lot of other factors. There's raw water lines that run right through the site. There's an existing water main that runs through the site. There's a driveway that serves Don Esrich that runs through the site. These are criteria that were dictating how to orient the buildings on the site and make it more cost effective. So we've been working with the city, but that has kind of led to an increase in costs because there are things like we're going to have to relocate a water service line. That's not the whole amount, but it's a decent amount to that. And then, of course, again, there's a good portion of that is the cost per student station increase that comes in every year.
Okay. Yeah, I might have said site conditions, not necessarily location, because I read that to mean that we're picking a different site in a different location than we originally thought, and that was driving the bus on extra cost instead of it being, site conditions that we hadn't planned on.
Yes, it's more of a siting issue of the facility on the location. Yeah.
Anyone else with questions on this page?
This is Leanne. I'd just like to add, just as a reminder, when we're doing the budgeting, that's based on the information we have. Facilities will also review the budget again as they get ready to award the GMP. The cost per student station changes throughout the year. I just happened to look. It's changed in the last week. The numbers have changed again. We just have to pick a time and lock in the numbers based on what we have available. But when we get ready to award the contract, at that time, we have to verify we're in compliance with cost per student station. And so I always ask, we get an updated budget sheet with a detailed budget, and we can adjust these project budgets again when we go to the board to award the contract. We also sometimes adjust them when I get ready to borrow. When I'm getting ready to issue the debt, I'm reaching out to facilities folks and ask them for the latest information they have, because we want to ensure that we're in compliance with cost per student station. That's required for the borrowing. We also don't want to borrow more than we need to and be worried about 15 or 20 years worth of interest payments. So these numbers get reviewed several times over the life of the project. And then again, when it's closed out. And my goal is to always come in under, but not a lot under, because then I would have borrowed and the money's not needed. So Dave and Kerry Kelly in his shop and I spent a lot of time trying to come up with the best number for what these are. So the decreases are generally because we borrowed already. Verdi and Addison, we've already borrowed the money. They've done their due diligence, and we need to reduce it because I actually didn't borrow as much as we'd originally planned. It wasn't needed. So the others will adjust as we continue to move forward with them.
In addition, on 05C, we're asking again for more land than the current temporary site sits on. And so that, when Mr. Porter said the condition of the site, that's part of it. And the other part of it is that we're asking for a bigger footprint than we currently have.
Okay. And I realized I had a question on the previous page, but you don't have to go back there. It's a more general question. Two of the items were for Riviera Beach Prep and Inlet Grove. Are they both conversion charters?
No, conversion.
Yeah.
Inlet Grove is a conversion charter. Riviera Beach Prep is a school district facility.
Okay. And remind me again how it works with conversion charters. The district owns the buildings, has to maintain the buildings, and builds the buildings. And how does with a regular charter, they have everything. They own the building, they build the building, they maintain the building, and all of that. So how's a conversion charter work in terms of district funding?
We're responsible for the actual providing them a facility. And so that's where the conversion charter differs from a regular charter school.
They have their own management then, separate like a
They
real
have their own board of their own board, their own governing structure.
Okay. Thank you. Well, yours, Dave.
Okay. Any other questions on the COPS page? Okay. All right. Now we get into the fun stuff. This is where I get to enjoy myself a little bit, and I say that because I'm very proud of the work that's been going on. The first slide here is again referring back to our facility renewals. With the COVID outbreak and the lockdown, we were fortunate enough that we were able to continue working all the way through the spring and through the summer. So we got a significant amount of work done at all these schools. And as you'll see, there were other independent projects like re-roofing and our maintenance department doing a lot of HVAC and lighting and playground modifications. They also got done at a lot of these schools. So while it was a challenge being away from school, our departments, on Ms. Paul's operations side, we were extraordinarily busy this summer, moving this stuff along. With our security projects, again, another instance where we had plenty of time. We got a lot more work done on our security projects, security cameras, card readers, doors. We just started off a whole series of projects for doors and card readers. So we're quite busy. And what I will say is we are now winding down with school about to start. So we're kind of finishing up the work that we were working on all summer in an effort to provide the schools back to the principals and their administrators, because some of the teachers may teach out of their classrooms. So we want to be able to provide them their schools unabated without construction activities. We will get back to operating in what we call our school year mode, where we will do some projects. But at this point in time, we're kind of not taking a break, but winding it down to allow them to get their feet under them at the new schools. Couple of, I don't need to go into too many of these things, but some of these photos represent some of the projects that we worked on this summer. Storefront replacements, flooring and lighting. We did a number of re-roofing and asphalt work, as well as HVAC and fire alarm projects. Okay, now moving on from the facility renewals, now we actually get into the bigger construction projects. The crown jewel of what we've been working on has been Verdi Elementary. Actually, and I apologize, I must now refer to it as the Verdi K-8, because the original elementary was a K-5. We moved into the holding school and rebuilt a campus on their old site, on their original site, but it's now for a K-8. So you'll see the completed product here on the aerial photos. You can follow my cursor. The bus loop and the parent drop-off is all on this side. And so this is where most of the people come in. This is the admin area. This is the big T building is the academic building. It's a 2-story academic building with the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Cafeteria, arts programs are all in this area. So absolutely incredible school. I recommend, if there's a way to have you drive by and take a look at it, please do so. It's a fabulous feat. And it's important to understand this feat, when I call it a feat, was because we literally started this construction project. The kids moved out last June 1st. They ended school June 1st of 19. The moment they moved out, we had to demo the whole site, move all the portables off, start construction, and get going. We had this school CO'd by July of this year. We basically got it done in just around 12 months. Absolutely incredible effort to get this done. Here's some of the site photos. They have kind of an embossed into the exterior panel. Some of the interior features. See, they all have computers, a lot of the technology that's gone into these schools. And I think, Mr. Porter, we had previously spoken on a different time about whether we were putting in flat screens. As you'll see, we have one flat screen mounted to the wall and another one on a portable stand that are in each of these classrooms. Okay, South Tech at Odyssey. This is the South Tech campus moving from their old location into the vacant Odyssey school. That's this main building right here. And this piece, this is the gymnasium, cafeteria, and the classroom facilities. We renovated the existing buildings and for their new academic programs, which are more of towards an adult ed program, education. And as well, what you'll see is at the far end of this facility, we built a new building during the same process. This is a garage bay building for their automotive technology programs. And again, another feat. Not only did we renovate the entire building over the course of 12 months, we started last May. We cleared and built this entire garage bay within 12 months. And now they are ready to start school at their new location starting Monday. Here's some of their photos. This is the new garage bays with a lot of the overhead technology and the lifts. They have a culinary program there, not only a kitchen for feeding students, but they actually have a culinary program there to work with it. And again, if you're familiar with Odyssey, it was a really nice school to start with. And so we've just improved upon and upgraded and give them a nice clean look on it. Okay, my next facility up is Washington Elementary. This project just started construction. What I put over here is this is the kind of the layout of the facility. There's an admin building here and a music building here. That's admin building here. And I can't see the music building over here. There they are on this picture. It's the admin building and the music building, and we're building the rest of the campus to wrap around it. As you can see, the project has been the old site has been completely demoed, and the new footers are being poured, and foundations and underground utilities are ongoing. And see, we've put the visqueen down for our footers. Next project, also in the same tract for completion, or for construction and completion, is Addison Meisner. On their existing site, we moved them over to the holding campus. We moved Verdi out of the holding campus, moved Addison Meisner in. Now we've demoed the site starting in early June, and we're on the way for foundations and slabs and underground utilities. You can see this is the main bus loop. The parent entrance is off of 13th. So for everyone's orientation, 13th is up here. The parents will be entering it up here. And this is where the bus loop will come in. So the facility is in this orientation, the horseshoe. Early in the process, but again, both Washington and Addison Meisner, we're also on a 12-month track, roughly, to get this built and operational. So both Washington and Addison Meisner will open in August of 21.
Dave, is this the same contractor as Verdi?
Yes.
Moss?
Addison Meisner and Verdi are both the same contractor.
Okay, thanks.
And my last set of slides is a project I wanted to point out to you, again, because I'm proud of all the work that we've done. Now, this does not happen to be a referendum project, but for many of you who are familiar with the adult education facility over on Military Trail in West Palm Beach, it's one of our oldest campuses. And we have constructed them a brand new campus with a much bigger 3-story building. Third story is not even built out, so it leaves opportunities for growth and change as the programs adapt, and an incredibly large parking lot, because obviously on an adult education facility, you have a lot of people, a lot of adults that need to come at different hours and whatnot. So that had been one of their biggest challenges on their facility. So that's it for the facility updates. I do have a few videos, if that's all right.
Dave, before you do the video, I just wanted to mention for the group, Adult Ed, as Dave mentioned, was not funded with the referendum. Further, it was funded with Adult Ed revenues, so money that they had saved up over the years. So that money could not have been used for any of the shortfalls on the sales tax projects. It's a completely separate funding source. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear in case there was a concern.
Yeah,
But it's a beautiful building.
let me add to that for what Leanne did, though. I mean, the project came in a couple $1 million over what Adult Ed had in their kitty to spend. And through some interesting and all legal gymnastics, Leanne and staff was able to figure out a way to split some contracts apart to let the project happen and get funded with Adult Ed money.
Yep. I always thank Leanne for the money. She does absolute miracles on making these projects work for us.
We've got a good team, Dave. Good team.
Okay, I've got a couple of videos. These are all videos, and forgive me, I'm going to hope that they work, but they are straight from our the School District's 10, the news network.
It's really hard to hear it, Dave.
Bear with me for a second while I try to, if I can increase that.
Environmental station has behind our school outside and looking at every single thing from the classroom colors to the walkway to our courtyard to our cafeteria to the outdoor areas that have for art and science we've done. I'm so happy to see that we've got state-of-the-art everything here. And we promised the voters if they gave us their money, we should have you. I think that the voters, especially the people around the school that pay their tax dollars to want this school to be built, I think they'll be thrilled to see what the accomplishments are. The attorneys, this school is actually ahead of the curve. The data shows that students are academically stronger in middle school years, 50% through K-8. wonderful, wonderful opportunity to bridge in this community. And let's say thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to get back to this.
Hi, everyone. We are going the distance together. For the next 30 minutes, we are
Uh-oh.
for the 2020.
I think I've got
You have the sound from another video running at the same time.
Yeah, I realized they had two videos running. I apologize there. Technical difficulties.
In here, all the lockers you see are getting replaced with new. All the benches you see are getting replaced with new. The showers are getting restored. And the restroom in this locker room is getting renovated as well for ADA compliance. This thing, the press box here, will receive a new roof along with the fencing around it. 70 existing site lights will be swapped out with new LED site lighting. Your intercom and public address system is getting an additional speakers. The generator is getting replaced. Old van, corridor, and all these other areas are all getting new vinyl floor.
Okay, and that, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
I'm not hearing any, Dave, so thank you very much.
We do have one more presentation. We like to show you our capital plan each year. So we did a board workshop on Wednesday with our school board, and so we wanted to share that same information with you. So the capital plan includes the sales tax as well as a lot of other things. It's the entire capital budget. So this gives you a sense for all the things that are going on. And I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Mr. Burke. He's going to give you a brief economic update.
Yes, good morning. And I'll try to keep this quick. Just as a reminder, so this will get more into kind of the operating budget for the entire school district. You know, we're really dependent on local property values and sales tax. The property values are holding so far, at least for this upcoming year. There is some concern about commercial real estate and how that may fall in the future because of the shutdowns. But right now, we're pretty solid on our ad valorem school taxes. So we're keeping a close eye on the state because the other big funding source for K-12 education is sales tax, state sales tax. And the budget that was approved by the legislature on March 19th and then signed into law in July by the governor, it was based on revenue forecasts that were done in January prior to the shutdown. And the governor did do about $1 billion in vetoes, and they're trying to work to try to keep the budget balanced. The state and our district is required to have a balanced budget each year, unlike the federal government. So on August 14th, the state economists at EDR, who do all the forecasts, they do a 3-year forecast, and that's what the legislature must work from. They updated their forecast, and there was a significant decline in anticipated revenues, as you would expect. It wasn't as bad as it may have been. We were worried that we'd see a drop of about 20% or more, 25% in state revenue. Their forecast for the upcoming school year that we're just getting ready to start on Monday, they're down about $3.4 billion or 9.9%. And they did close out last year, FY20, with a loss of $1.9 billion. So these are still big numbers. And there's also an important footnote in that forecast. The state is sitting on about $5 billion in federal CARES Act dollars that they haven't spent yet on COVID-19. And they're looking for flexibility to use that $5 billion plus dollars to backfill lost state revenue. And to date, that is not allowed. The feds haven't allowed that. So they don't have that flexibility right now. I guess they're hoping they'll get it. And the other thing I would be concerned about is they could have more costs related to COVID, and that would draw on that same $5 billion. So if they don't get that flexibility, these numbers are going to be significantly worse. We've been waiting to see if the state was going to have to take action to go back and revisit the budget. There is a comment from Senate President Galvano, who had said at the end of his letter basically that, these results will be used after the November reorganization of the legislature to see if they have to take any further action. So that tells us if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen after the election. But I'm concerned that we will experience a pretty significant mid-year budget cut to our operating budget. And Leanne, if you'll jump ahead, we've tried to analyze this, and we used our experience during the Great Recession to guide this. But if you look at the state's got their budget has several funds and different trust funds and different components, and you'll hear about a $90 billion state budget. When we look at education, we're really focusing on the state general revenue budget, which is about $34 billion. So they're down about about 10% or $3.4 billion. So we look at, what does the state funding, how does that support education? Of the general revenue state budget, about 37% goes to K-12 education. So assuming they just had to do like an equal kind of pro rata reduction across the different state agencies, we would lose about $1.3 billion statewide from K-12 education funding. And then Palm Beach County reflects about 7% of the state in terms of K-12 education. So our potential share of that loss is about $91.5 million that could impact us this upcoming school year. The state forecast also had a further decline in FY22, and we've estimated our share of that at about $53 million. So in the next 2 years here, we could lose about $145 million based on this estimate. Now, I don't know exactly what the state's going to do. I don't know how the legislature will handle this. Theoretically, they could raise taxes, but I really don't expect that. They could also, try to spare education and make cuts elsewhere in their budget, but it's going to be hard because we are just such a big component of that state budget. And, there could be another round of federal stimulus maybe that would help plug some of these holes in the budget. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But I just wanted to put everyone on notice that we are heading into some rough economic times, particularly on our operating budget. And, hopefully the ad valorem will hold up. And we're, the sales tax numbers, we're fortunate with our program here, as you've seen earlier from Ms. Evans, that we had some cushion because we have had some good years where we were running about 115%. The June numbers were somewhat encouraging. So hopefully we can ride that out and things will get back and this economy will continue to come back. But we are concerned about the operating budget, and we shared this with the board. And right now, we've been working as we developed our budget. This was anticipated, just acknowledging what's going on with the economy. And we've been working to create a reserve to help mitigate the impact of this, because mid-year cuts are hard to deal with when you've hired your teachers and the school year's underway. It makes it very challenging. So just wanted to give the committee a quick update. And Leanne, I think I stop there if you want to move ahead.
Thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate you being here and sharing that information with us today. I'm going to pretty much skip this slide. You got a great deal more detail than the board did on Wednesday, but this was just briefing them on the sales tax. And I'm going to jump into the capital budget, and all these numbers are for 10 years. So we do a 10-year capital plan. So when we start going through slides and you see some very large numbers, just keep in mind it's 10 years. We have created the 10-year plan. There's still some slight changes. There's a couple things that you got today that I realize aren't in this presentation. We'll be updating it prior to final adoption. The biggest changes are increased funding for computers, specifically in FY21, in order to get to a one-to-one model for all of our students. And that's really critical for them to be able to work through distance learning. And then we've also had a number of roof repairs and replacement that we've moved up that weren't, some of those were sales tax, a lot of them were not. So it's just trying to update roofs that were needed to be done. Those are the two biggest changes in the capital plan. And Dave, you can go to the next slide. This is a list of all the construction projects. And I'd point out anything that's in italics is on the referendum project list. The ones that are in bold are new. So we'll point out the Forest Hill parking lot and high school addition. You've already seen that. They're not funded with sales tax, but they're on the referendum list. They've been pushed back because we can't build the addition until we get some extra land from the city of West Palm Beach. So it's really contingent upon negotiations with the city and land at their golf course and trying to figure out. They're doing a lot of planning right now, so they're working through that. So anything that's in italics belongs to the school, is on the referendum list. So this is the overall list. You'll see we crossed through the demos of Old Grove and Plamosa. We were going with the assumption you all would approve that today, and the board had to agree to it as well. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And I'm going to go through these quickly. I know it's been long, and we're trying to finish up by 11. So debt service is something that I know our finance committee pays attention to. I like to make sure the board sees it. And I will point out there's two lines, and I know it's hard to read on your screen, but the red line is 50% of the capital outlay millage, the 1.5 mils we're allowed to levy. We're not allowed to issue debt that would not, the debt service would exceed that. Years ago, prior to the Great Recession, which we should just call the recession, and this may be the new Great Recession, we used to have 2 mils, and we were allowed to levy taxes up to this. We had financial difficulties, and the state had significant shortfalls, and this sounds eerily familiar, significant shortfalls to the operating side. And in order to fund the operating side of schools throughout the state, they reduced the school board's taxing authority for capital projects and dropped us down to 1.5 mils. So my worry is that that may be a release valve to help balance the problems we're going to face in 21 and 22 due to this economic slowdown in the recession. I'm hoping not. Really, school districts throughout the state can't afford to have another cut to their capital budget. But I leave that in there just as a caution. It's something we're monitoring very closely with the legislature. This does show all the debt that we plan to issue over the 10-year capital plan. And because we have, most of our debt gets paid off by 2030, and then by 2032, it's really all the old debt is paid off. And what we're doing is using that extra capacity to pay for the new debt. So instead of going out for 25 years, as we've done in the past, we're able to shorten it up to 14 or 15 years. So we're not obligating future boards as much. Let's go to the next slide. This is all the facilities projects. It's 1.8 billion, almost 1.9 billion. That includes all the facility renewal projects that are on the referendum list. That's that 966 million of the 1.3 billion sales tax. That's big numbers. That's all the work that you've been reviewing, and you saw a lot of those today. Other facility projects, that's continue. You can stay on the, there you go. Other maintenance and construction, all different types of work, site acquisition. And I also mentioned the improvements in Salem Palm and South Intensive that allowed us to eliminate the $500,000 a year for leasing space. I want to make sure the board was well aware of that as well. Now you can go to the next slide. Actually, let me pause right there for just a second. Were there any questions? I've been going through a lot of slides and haven't stopped. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm trying to get you done in 3 minutes now. The next one is security, transportation, equipment. This is just an update on the budgets that are there. We're doing through a lot of security projects that are funded with referendum, as well as state grants that we've been awarded. All those pretty brand new yellow buses on the roads. We've been buying a lot of school buses. They have a lead time of almost a year. It takes a long time to get those buses. So we will be ordering more buses to come in that would be in by the time school ends. But we've ordered a lot of buses to date, as well as replacing vehicles for maintenance and school police. Lots of police cars have been purchased with sales tax. And then equipment, that's furniture and equipment replacement, musical instruments, things like that. Next slide. And then technology, the education technology is funded with the sales tax. That's the large flat panels you saw in the pictures for Verdi. Those are funded with sales tax. That's really the only computer type device that can be funded with sales tax. And that's what the bulk of that is. And then under technology, a lot of it is the one-to-one initiative, buying computers. And then there's also a lot of data and technology infrastructure. The infrastructure, a lot of that is funded with the sales tax, the phone system, servers, routers, switches. And I don't even know what servers, routers, and switchers do necessarily, but those are infrastructure that are funded with sales tax. Most of the technology is not. We can't buy computers and laptops with sales tax. It's not allowed. So it's funded with other sources. Next slide. And this is close to the end. We've had to increase the amount of money for property flood insurance. We're seeing the marketplace, those costs are going up significantly. I imagine will increase again next year after the impact of Hurricane Laura in the Gulf Coast. The reserves, that includes the sales tax reserves, as well as some reserves for future years and capital contingency. A lot of that money is in year 8, 9, and 10. I'm really hoping that by the time we get to 8, 9, and 10, there really is still money available. There's a lot of assumption on revenues built into that may not come to fruition. But if we do end up with a lot of money in year 8, 9, and 10, that was actually our intent, that extra money would help pick up from where the sales tax ends. Not sure that's going to happen. There's a lot of things in play. So it's a lot of estimates when you get out to years 8, 9, and 10. But that's where most of those reserves are. And then charter schools, charter schools receive capital outlay dollars. And the statute currently says that if the state does not have enough money to pay for it, then school districts would be picking it up. So for FY21, the state did fund it. We assume in our capital plan that the future years, so 22 through 30, are funded by the district. That's the assumption we made, so that we never have to go in and cut budgets. I'd rather the state give us great news in 2022 and there's extra money that we can use to expedite some projects. The feedback we're getting, and Mr. Porter sent me a note he received a couple weeks ago that indicated the state was not going to have any money for PICO dollars for school districts in the future. And that's how they fund charter school capital outlay. So we don't receive any of the PICO money directly, but it does go to charters. So if the state does face significant shortfalls, which is what we're hearing and Mr. Burke talked about, that may impact that charter school capital outlay. We may be picking that up in the future. Next slide. And this is really the wrap up. We have some slight adjustments that we'll still have between now and September. We're trying to finalize. I'm trying to finish everything up today, honestly, to get it out for preparing all the documents to go out to the board next week for adoption on September 9th. The things we're concerned about, I always remind the board, the sales tax money is all dedicated to specific projects and most of it's deferred maintenance. We can't change how that money is to be spent. We're very cognizant of how that money is to be spent, and we report back to you regularly to show that we're using the money as intended. Legislative changes could certainly impact our budgets. That cost per student station that Dave mentioned. DOE currently does not require approval of our construction projects. They could try to put that back. That would certainly impact us. Funding for charter schools, those things can all impact the capital plan. Property values so far have held up very well. There is concern, and the EDR, the economists for the state, as they mentioned all the concerns about the operating budget and the state funding sources, they're also concerned about property values and what they think will happen. The local property appraiser is more concerned about commercial property. As you have more and more people working from home, is all that space needed? So property values, if they go down, that directly impacts the capital budget. So it's something we're monitoring very closely. Sales tax revenues, so far I think we're good, but it's something we're monitoring. If there is a significant reduction and it exceeds the amount that's in that sales tax reserve, it could impact projects on the referendum list. Hoping that doesn't happen. Looks like, as I said, cautiously optimistic there. We'll have to see how that goes. And there are additional needs for maintenance, whether it's staff, services, preventive maintenance. We want to make sure that we're keeping up with maintenance cost so we can try to avoid another backlog in the future. But that's something that is going to be a struggle. There's a lot of work. Just as I mentioned, there was a lot of extra roofs that had to be added in and roof repairs. We continue to face needs and shortfalls for capital. And then just the general rising construction costs. So these are all things that we're monitoring as we do the capital plan. And pretty much as soon as this one's adopted, we start on the next one. We don't really stop capital planning. It goes year round. So I think that's the end. If you go to the next slide, it's just discussions. So if there are any questions or comments.
Leanne, I got a couple. The $119 million for charter that you're assuming we may have to spend. If we don't have to, then that's $119 million of found money.
Right. And it's spread out it's over 9 years.
Oh, it is.
10 to 11 million. It's not all at once. I have an amount allocated for each year. And this year we had budgeted $10.8 million for charter schools. And that was one of the things that helped us fund all the one-to-one computers that we needed to buy. So there's all these things that pop every year of new needs. And that's the instant relief valve. There's some extra money there if the state funds it. If the state doesn't fund it, then it's budgeted for charter schools. So it's something to keep an eye on, but it's not all at once. It's spread out.
My second bigger question goes back to why we needed the referendum in the first place. It's because for at least 10 years or more, we didn't have enough money to maintain what we had. Now we're fixing everything up. And if we run the same thing, 6 years from now when the referendum's done, we don't have enough money to maintain the roofs and to maintain the air conditioning, then we're going to be back in the same situation. So how do we somehow find the money and get the board to approve the money to make sure we have enough money going forward for proper maintenance?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'd point out, and Dave, if you go back to the slide on debt, that red line and green line, that's really how we ended up getting here. When the state reduced our taxing authority, that difference between that red line and green line equated to about $1.6 billion, and the sales tax is $1.3 billion. That's really what the difference was. When they reduced our revenue stream coming in by 25%, the district couldn't continue to do everything, and that started in 2008, and it caught up with us, and that's 10 years worth of backlog. That's what caused the need for the referendum. That really hasn't gone away. That problem still exists. The district and every other school district throughout the state comments they don't have enough money coming in to do all the maintenance that needs to be done. So we're doing everything we can to get the sales tax is handling the deferred maintenance, but we continue to have more and more maintenance needs coming up. Property values have grown, and that has certainly helped. I'm really worried that if we get another decline in property values, it will exacerbate the issue and make it worse. So we spend a lot of time, the district staff, trying to figure out the best use of the dollars we have. And Dave will tell you, I walk into the meeting and said, let's pretend this is the end of it. You have no more money. What is the most important use of our funds? And we have that question every year and reevaluate the budget. Is this what we planned 3 years from now to do? It's now today. Is that still the best use of the money? So we're constantly reevaluating how money is spent and closing out projects that we don't need or came in under budget. We're trying to scrape the barrel every year to get the budget balance. But it is a concern, and it's something we're watching and looking ahead for. That's one of the reasons we always did a 10-year plan. I expanded it to 10 to 11 to cover the sales tax referendum, and we've kept it at 10 years, and we've done that intentionally. It's more work, and those last 5 years are very fuzzy and gray and lots of estimates in there, but it helps us see what's coming, and are we expecting a shortfall, and where do we think we're going to be And we are concerned that we're going to have a shortfall. We don't have good data yet. There's a lot of work to be done, but the sales tax is helping us fill the gap that was created when the taxing authority went down. Problem is it didn't come back. So we're going to continue to monitor it.
Are we kind of reminding the board frequently of the lack of proper, correct maintenance dollars? I know they can't just print money, but if we just have a line item in the budget and say, well, here's what we got covered for maintenance, somehow the board really needs to be reminded that's what's in there, but it's nowhere near enough.
Dave and I just had that conversation earlier this week. We're required to balance the budget. We can't show a shortfall. We're not allowed to do that. But one of the things that we need to start working on is what is it going to look like when the sales tax goes away, and really gathering the data of everything we need to be doing. How much are we able to fund with the revenue that we have? And over the 10-year sales tax, we worked really hard to increase the amount of money set aside for maintenance to get it to the level that the Council of Great City Schools recommends. So our spending for maintenance is going from what was about 40 or 50 million up to 100 million. It was year 7, it's year 2023, I think is when it starts to kick in, and it grows gradually. So we're trying to figure out the best way to use those funds and determine if there's still a shortfall. I have a feeling there is, but we still have a lot of work to do before we're ready to say that.
Yeah, that's what I remember when we approved the referendum, that there was a set aside for maintenance, knowing that we can't just fix everything up and then expect it to survive without being touched again.
And so far that's still there. But if the state reduces revenue, or if we have a dramatic decline in property values, that will certainly dig into that. I mean, EDR has come out with some pretty dire predictions of where they think is going to happen with the capital budget. The local property appraiser doesn't agree, and the numbers, when I look at it, it doesn't really make sense. They don't show a big decline next year and the year after that. They show the decline in years 8, 9, and 10, or they show it out, and I'm not sure where that comes from. And we'll learn more as they release more of their data, and we learn more every year, as we get closer to that window of time. But it's something that we're monitoring and we continue to discuss. Dave and I have had lots of conversations recently. I meet with him once a week for a couple of hours. So we're meeting weekly and looking at budget. I already told him next year's capital budget is going to be on a different timeline. We've implemented a new system to prepare the budget and the capital budget, and the timeline is going to be earlier in the year. So we're going to be kicking in the budget process and hope to have the budget all balanced and ready to go to the board in April instead of August. So this budget cycle really isn't going to end this year. We're going to roll right into the next one. But the new system also has some interesting functionality, and I think we're going to be able to show some of that extra data that you're asking for. So we're going to be working on that.
Okay. Any other questions for Leanne on the capital plan? Okay. I think we're down to end of the meeting and
future meeting dates.
Yep.
On the second page of the agenda, I list the future meeting dates. So the next one is November 5th, and that will include election of officers. We were supposed to do election of officers at this meeting. It's supposed to be at the first meeting after school starts, but the start of school was delayed. So I shifted that to the next meeting. So we'll have that in November. And then we have the future dates. I'll be loading those out in your calendar. I try not to go out into future years, but it's about time to go ahead and give you the next year's dates. So we'll go ahead and do that. At this point, the virtual meetings exist only because we have an executive order from the governor that allows us to do that. And that order runs through September. I don't know if it will be extended or not. That's something that I will let you know, and we'll keep you apprised on how that would work. Our current policy requires that you have to have a quorum of people present when we do a regular meeting. So one of the things I'll be reaching out to you all is to find out if you're willing to come in for meetings, and hopefully by November, we're in a much better place with COVID. I don't know where we'll be in November. I wish I had that crystal ball that would really give me answers on how things will be. But we'll continue to monitor that. So this November 5th meeting would include data through September 30th. If we see anything dramatic changing in sales tax revenues, I'll certainly reach out and let you know. So far, it looks pretty good, and we're within the projections I had, my updated projections. We're certainly staying within that reserve. So as long as we're staying in that reserve, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm not really worried about sales tax at this point. I'm more worried about what property values will do in the future. So these dates are out there. I'll send these notices out to you so you'll have them in your calendar.
Okay.
I have nothing else. I want to make sure that I thank all of you. We so appreciate your willingness to do virtual meetings and to be with us this way since we can't be together in person. Hopefully this works. I mean, I think we've had a lot of practice at this point doing virtual meetings.
I actually like them better than having to drive someplace.
I like them too. I've been able to do a lot of virtual meetings, and it's nice. Your meetings are all governed by sunshine, so it's not something that we have the ability to say, let's just do this. But I know internally, I think we'll be having a lot more virtual meetings than we do in person.
Yeah.
Drive time. It makes it so much easier. Dave and I are located in different buildings. So instead of having to drive up to his office, I can just stay in mine and we can participate in a meeting like this. So
I've had a lot of design meetings with clients virtually where I'm sketching on the drawing and sharing my screen, and it's like they're at the conference table with me. So.
Yeah. It actually works better in some cases. The technology works better. So
okay. Anything by anyone else? All right. If not, thank you, everyone, and we are adjourned.
Thank you again. We appreciate your help.
All right.